US President Donald Trump's jaw dropping headlines day after day have now hit the domestic political discourse in India. In a dramatic claim, the American president has suggested that there was an attempt to interfere in the Indian electoral process. How do we read these comments? Should we take them literally? Should we read between the lines? And if there was an attempt at US interference, who was leading this attempt and how? I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. Donald Trump has defended the decision to cut $21 million in US aid that was ostensibly being provided to increase voter turnout in India. As it so happens, the Indian voter turnout in the general elections was higher than the American voter turnout in the US presidential elections. Trump, in his comments, has indicated a conspiracy, an attempt to interfere in the Indian electoral process, going so far as to say perhaps they wanted somebody else to win. He does not define who the they is, and it's not clear whether his reference is to an entity in India or whether he's referring to the Biden administration. These comments were made in a speech that had other jaw dropping headlines as well, including his description of Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, as a dictator, and also alleging that American taxpayers' money that had been provided to Ukraine had half of it, he said, had gone missing. But in the Indian context, Trump's remarks have created a veritable political storm. The BJP and the opposition are now at it, going for each other's throats. The BJP says that this is proof that the Congress and its accompanying ecosystem was allowing Indian institutions to be, quote unquote, infiltrated by foreign elements. The opposition is hitting back, saying that while the BJP is trying to distance itself from USAID today, not so long ago, the same Modi government was engaging with USAID officials as well as USAID backed platforms. A lot to talk about as we live in the age of Trump. We're getting used to a headline a minute. No part of the world is unimpacted. So why should India be? Let's introduce our guest today as we look at Trump's big claim about an attempted conspiracy in the Indian electoral process. Kartha ma'am is with us. She's, of course, one of India's foremost security and strategic affairs experts. Welcome to the program, ma'am. Veteran diplomat Ambassador Dilip Sinha is with us as well. Rajat Sethi is with us, political analyst and commentator. Namaskar, Rajat. Good to see you. And Saba Naqvi, veteran journalist and author, is with us as well. Always good to have you with us. Saba, without further ado, I think I should play out what Trump said and let Trump speak for himself. Take a look.
And $21 million for voter turnout in India. What do we need to spend $21 million for voter turnout in India? Wow, $21 million. I guess they were trying to get somebody else elected. Well, we ought to tell the Indian government, because when we hear that Russia spent about $2 in our country, it was a big deal, right? They took some internet ads for $2,000. This is a total breakthrough. $21 million for India elections.
This is a total breakthrough. He's talking, of course, about the allegation that there was an attempted Russian interference in the US electoral process, saying that amount of money doesn't even compare to what was going to be provided here, that he's held back. Again, to put it into context, the facts say that Indians voted in greater numbers than the Americans in the elections, and also outspent America by all accounts on the election. So this $21 million isn't a lot of money, Ambassador Sinha, but it's an alarming and big claim to come from the world's most powerful politician. What do you make of it?
Well, this is one of those moments in a country's history where the change in government, although it was a democratic change in a democratic country, it is almost like a violent coup having taken place, where all the previous institutions are being shaken and the skeletons are coming out. And here we have a situation where you have USAID's secrets being spilled out. There are so many other countries that have been very badly hit. We are, in fact, fairly mildly hit. But then given our politics today, it is unlikely that a claim like this would go unnoticed. Obviously, the political parties are at each other's throats. But the fact is that interference in Indian elections, that is money coming into either NGOs, think tanks, or political parties, is legion. It has taken place in the past. We have had talk of CIA agents in India. You have had KGB agents in India. So these things have been there in the past. In fact, this one is actually relatively mild because it is not clear what the money was here for and how it was channeled, whether it was channeled through an NGO or was it part of that deal or the MOU that the Election Commission had signed in 2012, which Chief Election Commissioner S.Y. Qureshi has referred to. Of course, he has said that no money came in, but apparently some activities took place. That's quite possible. So it could be quite innocuous. Unless we know the details, it would really be jumping the gun to say that there was
But
interference.
who is going to give us these details? The
Well, it
point
might come
is,
out through the US aid figures if they start releasing papers. What we have got is essentially just a minor leak. But just as happened in the case of the Soviet Union in 1990, when all the KGB papers came tumbling out of the cupboards, this may happen here. But at the moment, we really don't know. It was just to organize some seminars that some of these think tanks do in India, or was it to generally to give money to candidates or to political parties? We have no idea of that. So until we get that kind of information, it would really be premature to say that there's direct interference. But of course, it's very ironic, as you rightly pointed out. Elections in India have always had a higher turnout. It wasn't just last year, even earlier. It has always been higher. So it's very ironic that America is trying to promote electoral turnout in India when it should be doing it back home in America itself.
so at the moment, before I open this up and come to Rajat, at the moment, Ambassador Sinha, you would not take this literally. You would see this more as Trump playing to his base, or do you think that there has to be an accounting for this claim in India? And if there has to be an accounting for this claim in India, who should do it? I would assume the Election Commission. I don't know.
Well, the Election Commission should certainly answer whether it received any money from USAID for ordinary things like, let's say, organizing a seminar or organizing a study. It's quite possible. But they haven't come out with that. That the money may have flowed into some of the US-backed think tanks in India who organize a lot of activities in the country. So it would be difficult for Government of India, apart from the Election Commission coming out, to say exactly where the money went. It would be for the USAID people to tell us where the money went. And that, I think, we should ask the USAID representative here. Since the information has come out that they spent $21 million in India, we should legitimately ask them. After all, we have an FCRA here, the Foreign Currency Regulation Act. So, and since they're operating in India, it is legitimate for us to ask them what this money was spent for.
Yeah. Rajat, would you agree with that we don't have all the facts? That, of course, it's a big claim, but Donald Trump makes many big claims, that till we know who this money was given to and for what, the suggestion that even the Election Commission could have received some of these funds just for creating maybe voter awareness, or this is to organize conferences. Should that be read as tantamount to interfering in the electoral process, as Trump suggests? The BJP, of course, on social media today has gone for the opposition. They have said that this is further proof that the links between, let's say, the Gandhi family, George Soros, and other institutions, all the dots are now being joined by the BJP's Amit Malviya to start with. How do you read Donald Trump's comments? I mean, does it make you laugh? Are you holding your head? Are you taking it seriously? Are you saying, wait, hang on, this is a big claim, but I need to know more?
So, I mean, without giving too much credence to verbatim what Donald Trump has said, I still believe that this news was still out, the $21 million under the heading of election voter participation of voter in India. Under that heading was there in the news for some time. It was just given an added bit of credence when the US president had said it out loud. Now, I'll just give you a brief background as to, where are the dots and how are the dots connecting to this ultimate story, what we are hearing now. See, first of all, the West and its invisible tentacles tend to have this tendency of importing democracy. More so the left-leaning liberal governments around the world, they have this bias that they are here for a larger purpose, and that larger purpose is exporting democracies. They have been experimenting, and not just now. They assume that this is their God-ordained task to do, and they're happy to allocate funds to do that for several decades now. So it is not something which comes as a shock to anybody who understands international politics and the sway US has through these invisible tentacles. Now, I can tell you the first thing that Prime Minister did back in 2014 in terms of controlling the influence of these external organizations was by banning NGOs and taking away FCRA licenses from so many of these NGOs littered across the country. You would be surprised to know, I have served in the Northeast, and there were remote places who were getting funding from USAID organizations, not USAID, but other organizations, and had the FCRA, and they were working on human trafficking related subjects, which had remotely no connection to human trafficking whatsoever. So Prime Minister Modi knew that there are these funds which are being handed over to these some of these NGOs who have shady scope of work, who are not out in the open where they are spending. As soon as he did that, I was part of several track 2 dialogues. In one of those track 2 dialogues, I was in UK. Surprisingly, the member of parliament there, he said that, can you please request your prime minister to remove the ban that he has put on these NGOs, that they cannot receive foreign funding. Why is that the Western leaders jump onto any moment that they get to free up and remove any kind of shackles that are there, which stops funding going into Indian organizations, Indian bodies, corporates, whatsoever? So there were enough evidences in the making. Now, what this has done is, while BJP has consistently been saying that there are these forces which are trying to act against and interfere in India's election processes, now this is as black and white a proof as the BJP can get, and they're going to run with it. You cannot stop them. And last point here, Prime Minister also said, as soon as Donald Trump was sworn in and he occupied office, the first thing is that I do not hear the rumblings in the parliament anymore. As if the plug has been removed from the sockets. There is no sort of connection which is powering up these opposition leaders. So Prime Minister, directly from his office, he has consistently been pointing out that there is wrongful influence in our internal processes.
Well, I have a brief question for you before I go to Saba and Kartha. And the question is this. Yes, the BJP is going to run with it. The BJP is already running with it. But the Congress is also going through archives and saying, hang on, the USAID that you call a pariah today, FM Jaishankar was meeting with USAID representatives. Smriti Irani was attending, conferences in which USAID had a direct role. So you see, government has changed in US, so a lot has changed. But when the Biden administration was there, India, of course, engaged with USAID in a very different way. So the argument could be made that suddenly, because Trump has changed his mind, should India change our mind along with Trump? I can't hear Rajat. Yeah, sorry. Rajat. Yeah.
And this is a fair point. Nobody is saying that you need to jump here onto any kind of a conclusion. But 21 odd crores is 200 odd crore Indian rupees, which is a substantial amount of money. No amount of conferences require this bigger amount. It is actually greater than the budget of several prominent political parties when they go into an election. So it is that substantial an amount of money. But I can also say, even if you do not want to get into any sort of conclusion or any amount of inferences out of the statement, US aid has to be pushed towards disclosing where all this amount of money went in.
That I agree with. That I agree. 100%. 100%.
And if not, I mean, USAID is anyway dying. I don't see them, lasting beyond a couple of months from here onwards. But you need to take it to the logical conclusion. Identify were these private entities who were getting these fundings, were these NGOs, was it election commission? Just lay out where. It is important for citizens like us that there can be no amount of influence being peddled into our election processes. This is absolutely a non-negotiable territory.
Saba Naqvi, before I come to Professor Kartha, would you agree with that? I think that's a fair thing. You see, right now we're kind of fighting with shadows and in the shadows. Nobody can actually take an informed position because we don't know who this money went to, right? And we don't know what this money was used for. We don't know if all of it was spent, was a fraction of it spent, who spent it, what does it mean to increase voter turnout? Prima facie, it does seem peculiar that the Americans should have to provide funding to increase voter turnout in India. Prima facie. That said, I don't want this to be like the 70s and a kind of paranoia creeping in. The foreign hand was in fact mastered and created by Indira Gandhi, in the Indira Gandhi age, and we're back to it. How do you see it?
So, Barkha, hi. Hi to everyone. I came to the show because after the story broke, I was asked by some channels, and I don't want to be part of those national, anti-national debate. So I said, let me, because I want to find out more.
Yeah.
I've seen the charge. How on earth did this money come here? Donald Trump
Hmm.
has said it came, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
To influence whom? Is he implying? We don't know yet. So I really don't want to be part of that kind of wild
Sure.
situation tonight.
Sure.
Not that I'm always, but today I don't want to be part of it. Plus, I've got other things to do, but I want to actually get information and apply our minds. How did the money come? We must find out. And
Hmm.
what does he mean? Does he mean? Do you remember during the Arvind Kejriwal movement of Anna, there were charges that the Ford Foundation has funded some democracy things. I remember over the years, I could just be that the Ford Foundation was funding right to information movement. This was the Congress saying that they were funded. So I don't know all this. Now,
Hmm.
who funds what? The basic point is Donald Trump is a figure who has had a triumphant second return. In his first term, he was plagued by the charge that Russia had somehow influenced the US election process. What has he done since the Prime Minister of India went there? Let's just imagine that in the madness there is a method, and I do think there is. He's quite clear he wants out of Ukraine. He's been quite
Hmm.
clear. That's the most entertaining lot of stuff I've seen today in
Yeah.
the world. His remarks on Zelensky. What does he want? He hosts the prime minister. He's very warm with him. He
Yeah.
then declares that he's going to have equal tariffs. Indians keep coming back in chains, and now suddenly he's thrown this idea that actually there was this bad lot of people who were trying to influence elections in India. Simultaneously, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, is going to Europe and saying that the Europeans are throttling democracy there.
Yeah.
He's implying to not inviting certain right-wing formations to certain things. So we are living in a time when the world is changing. And let's be clear, we are not getting any favors. So let's actually find out. I would like people who are more expert than me. How could money like this have come? Could it have come through the Ford Foundation, funding things like transparency in Indian life, voter thing? Because surely we vote much more than the Americans or any Western society does, as far as I know. We really go and take our vote seriously.
Hmm.
So there are many aspects to this. He has just hosted the PM. 2 days later, he's saying the tariffs are back. We're going to give you as much as you give us, that kind of stuff. The Indians are coming back still chained up. Unless it's the chains have been removed, nothing. It's business. He's going to do business. He's dumping his own allies in Europe at this moment. So we don't know anything, and we just have to watch how the world is reshaped by this individual. And I just want to know if this money came. He says it came. Was anyone able to prove that Russia funded elections in the US? Were they?
Hmm.
Tell me. I mean, the media there was very against Donald Trump, at that point, the traditional media there, were they ever able to prove anything? So it is one of those stories where I think my job as a reporter is to ask the questions and not believe at this point. And I think you also
So,
seem to
so
agree
what,
with that.
what I 100% agree. I opened by saying that there's just so
Yeah,
much we don't know.
yeah.
But what would be the most pertinent question in one line before I go to Professor Tara Karta?
I would
What's the
like to ask Donald Trump at the next open press conference where normal journalists ask questions and not right wing influencers, where they ask questions and say, "Sir, you have made a serious allegation about Americans interfering in the democracy of another country. Please tell us what was the mechanism through which they did it." That's
yeah?
all.
Okay.
An agency could ask that. You
Okay,
know,
Professor. Yeah, I think Saba, you're. I think we're all in agreement that somebody needs to give us more information. That somebody at the moment should be most likely USAID itself, since it's the one embroiled in this. It's not difficult for USA to simply present or place in the public domain this 21 million. Who was it given to? What was its remit? Was it spent? And the biggest question of all, who received it? Who received it? Was it the election commission? Was it a private entity? Was it an NGO? Professor Karta, what leaps out at you in this? Trump is vastly entertaining, but there is no reason to believe that he doesn't mean what he says, right? We can't treat him as some
Yes,
comic. We can't treat him
absolutely.
as some comic. He is the president of the United States of America. His words count for something, no matter whether we agree or disagree with them. Now that he's made this claim, what should happen next? I mean, should the government of India say, send a notice to USAID saying, tell us who received this fund? It would be easy to find out where did this money go?
I have right in front of me this MOU signed between the the intimation of the MOU signed between the CEC and the International Foundation for Electoral Systems, IFES. There it says, we've got a tie-up with them. They're going to help us with democracy. And this CEC, the Chief Election Commissioner, also says, listen, we will help other countries to learn from our democratic system. So it all seems a very above board. I mean, there it is. It's there in black and white. Number two, USAID has been there for donkey's years. It is a congressionally mandated budget. In its budget documents, it clearly says its mission is to push US foreign policy interests. Now, if you have a problem with that, you should never have allowed them here in the first place, right? But they've been here for years. Barkha, you and I, in our PhD years, I remember reading these, Radio Free Europe, all that is funded by these people. There's a bunch of stuff which all of us used. So I find this whole BJP versus Congress thing very amusing. The USAID has been doing, if you look at his 2020, I was looking at his 2020 budget documents. It's the same thing. It goes for even international military training. Funding goes for that IMET. It goes for, for this narcotics, INCLE programs. So all that is under USAID. The problem arises. What USAID itself does is there in black and white. It's a budgeted document. What we don't know is, for example, IFES is funded also by HIT bringing up the Soros, all the time. But unfortunately, these people are funded also by Soros. So it is the fronts behind which they operate. Like there is one, I just found this Internews network with about 1,000 plus journalists who are again funded by USAID. So it is those things we have no idea.
But you see, USAID was not considered an untouchable entity till Trump won. So even if somebody took money from USAID, they may have thought this is a very legitimate source of funding. It was not treated as illegitimate even by our own government or our own authorities, right?
Exactly. And many times it was not. It was a genuine, sort of in terms of your narcotics, assistance to narcotics officers. I know of that. That is in terms of training. And in this MOU, which I can see, it says that election commissioners also telling this thing that we will teach other countries our democratic system. So it's not some, spy versus spy thing right here. But like I said, what we don't know and which we definitely need to ask is, can you give us a breakup of the funding which went through IFES, which went through NGOs, not just through, the ostensible IMET network, which is easily accounted for. Where else did this go? Certainly we need to find out. But I mean, it's all a little, what shall I say, spy versus spy thing right now.
Uh-huh. So this is an interesting point, and I want to first come to Rajat before I come to Ambassador Sinha. Dr. Tara Kartha says this could be an above-board MOU with the Election Commission. Yes, there might be some open society link that is found, George Soros link that is found, but USAID by itself, if it turns out that the EC has received some funding, or maybe didn't receive the funding, was going to, because the funding has been scrapped, was going to, then do these conspiracy theories about interference collapse? Because it was an EC MOU.
No, then you have to go through clause by clause. What was this funding for? Why does Election Commission, which is a constitutionally mandated organization, and it draws its power, has its own coffers, it can go to the budget, and those budgets cannot be taken away by the executive. There are a whole host of things which preserves the domain of the Election Commission. What was the need of Election Commission to come in and ask for money? So, I mean, I personally feel that constitutional bodies should steer away from any kind of an external influence, and it should be hard-coded if it has not been done so far. The problem is not as simple. I mean, I personally feel it is an RTI-able thing. I mean, you can put in RTI and figure out the next day, Election Commission will have to tell you that did this amount of money come in, and if it came in, where all was it spent? So again, exporting the processes of election, how to do it, what are the modus operandis that India has actually mastered, and discussing it around the world's democracies. That is a fair deal. And if election commission takes money from USAID to actually go out and spread the word around how we have been conducting our elections, that's an educative exercise. I don't see any problem. I mean, we are all above a basic IQ not to question those things, right? The real problem is that USAID operates through these network of contractors. They don't just have contractors sitting in the US. They do have in US contractors as well, and they have some direct contractors here in India too. What are those private entities trying to onboard certain more private entities here in India? How does one stop that? Suppose there is a campaign company which is campaigning for the Congress party, or any party for that matter, pick BJP for instance, and that private limited company is getting money from the USAID. That's clear interference. And that is a very established route, what US calls as interference. So if it is reciprocal tariff, it should be reciprocal interference regulation also. I mean, if you have a private entity there, and if Russia tries to pay that private entity, and that buys ads in Facebook to influence election process, that is influence, black and white. Similarly, if there is a private entity, and US government should actually put those things out. So we are not just here after a smoking gun. We are here about legitimately trying to foolproof our democracy from any kind of foreign interference. And let me tell you, US and all its multiple hands tend to operate in all kinds of crazy means. You would have read the Washington Post story around raw officials being interviewed in or being intercepted in Maldives, claiming that India is trying to stage a coup over there. So, and how does Washington Post journalist, I mean, you've been writing, Barkha ji, on Washington Post. How does a Washington Post journalist know about, the interception technologies and intercepting raw? If it was the invisible hand of the CIA behind that, and there were no funding going into to tie up the whole operation. I mean, come on, we are not naive. We know Bangladesh. I can tell you, in 2022, we were part of an important conference. Sheikh Hasina literally was pleading before Indian government delegations who were there, part of the conference, saying to please tell the US not to interfere and not to funnel money to the Islamic actors there in Bangladesh. But US went ahead and did it nevertheless. They did that in Thailand. They have been experimenting. This is the problem of left-leaning politicians in the US. The Chuck Schumer type of politicians. They believe that they are here for a larger purpose beyond politics. That larger purpose is that these third world countries have to be taught what politics they need to choose instead of what they want to democratically choose. This exporting democracy is their biggest disease. That is what Trump is after. And this is why you will see the conservative thought leaders here in India find perfect sync with thought leaders who have a bent towards conservative thinking in the US also. That is that common link.
That is fine. And I think Trump, if you extend that argument, Trump is clearly not that interested in the so-called saving democracy project in Zelensky. He's in fact calling Zelensky a dictator who has siphoned off the funds. That's basically Trump's big claim today. We in India are obsessed with hamare bare mein kya bola, but the big global story today is that Trump is calling Zelensky a dictator who has siphoned off 50%, according to Trump, of the money sent to Ukraine is quote-unquote missing. Now, Ambassador Sinha, Trump's age creates all kinds of new challenges for diplomats around the world, for governments around the world, including here in India. Now, if you're a foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar has been, the opposition has shared the images of Jaishankar meeting with USAID representatives, former ministers of the BJP being on platforms backed by the USAID. And the BJP is trying to hit back and saying, hang on, we think there's an open society George Soros link. It's the left ecosystem that looks up to the West for its for so-called democratic values. How does the government handle this? Yes, we all agree USAID needs to give us answers. But how does the government of India, how does the foreign ministry handle or respond to what Trump has said?
Well, it would be useful to check with the USAID people, this revelation that's just come, to find out what their activities in India are. A lot of these activities must be open and above board. For example, the cooperation with the Election Commission. The Election Commission also should come out with the activities it has organized, because it is in the interest of fairness that if we have organized, let's say, a couple of seminars or 20 seminars abroad in other countries, we should disclose that we have done it in cooperation with USAID to promote democracy. It's not a bad thing to organize these activities. But at the same time, we must accept that, as is coming out in these revelations, there is a lot of waste and fraud also within the USAID itself. And while our government organizations, if they are cooperating with USAID, that can be considered to be kosher. We should know where the USAID money is going to the other organizations and non-government organizations. Not that everything, all that is suspect. But nevertheless, it is important that people should know about, there should be greater transparency in the activities of these organizations, including the USAID. But you're quite right.
But from a diplomatic point of view, I mean, should the MEA be issuing a statement to this? Like, what is the appropriate governmental response to this? I'm really keen to know that.
Well, the governmental response should be, it should come out and explain if there was an MOU, as is rightly pointed out, and there were activities that Government of India was organizing in cooperation, either Government of India or the Election Commission, which in this case is going to be actually operating very closely with MEA, because I don't think Election Commission should organize any seminars outside India without cooperating with MEA. So those activities should be released to the public. So people should know about this. And if there are other channels of expenditure by the USAID, then those should be sought by Government of India, by MEA from the USAID, and then made known to the people, because questions are being asked and it has become politically sensitive in India. And it is important for people to know what's going on with the kind of money that we are
But one of our viewers, Prasad Davuri, writes in saying USAID has done this funding during the first Trump administration. No idea if this is true. I remember attending the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in Hyderabad in November 2017, which was led by USAID and Ivanka Trump. So it wasn't as if Trump also always hated. Rajat, you have an interjection there? Hated USAID, Rajat, and then Saba and Professor Kartha.
Just a very small, short intervention here. Again, there is no problem if you want to do certain things in a transparent manner. If you want to say, for instance, if your objective is that the two startup ecosystems of India and US should actually collaborate together, and we are having this Global Entrepreneurship Summit where USAID is coming and sponsoring, there's absolutely nothing wrong. Government of India also extended certain amount of funding to have that event in Hyderabad. Where is the problem in that? There is no problem. But the problem really is that when you have these large sums of money going in a clandestine way, where you suspect the motive of it, the motive should be above suspicion, and that is what we need to establish here.
Saba, let me bring you in. So I think what we're hearing is USAID funding by definition is not the problem. If USAID was going to, do something with the Election Commission, in which, as was pointed out, the Foreign Ministry would have had to be involved if there was any amount of, global conferences or whatever, all it needs is one statement. One detailed statement. Either the USAID can place its audit in the public domain, the EC can issue a press statement, the Foreign Ministry can say it is hereby clarified that no money has been spent. I mean, why do we not know? That is what is irritating me. Saba,
You have a very good question. You kept on asking, what is the official response? What is happening these days? And it's not just happening here, it's happening in the US also, where world policy is declared on social media platforms, right? And by the most influential people. It's happening here. The other day, there was this Sam Pitroda story. So you had now, BJP is the ruling party of India. In the old world, China is our biggest trade partner. There was everyone saying China is an enemy, you are calling it friend, China. So it's all become bizarre. We are living in that kind of world. So right now you have everyone shouting and screaming because of the nature of the media, but we don't have an official response. So do we not even have the brain space left for an official response? We need an official response. We need a logical processed response to this. But now we are just into enemy of the state, enemy of the people, right wing, left wing. That's how we are. That's how we have become. But these are actually matters in the old days where we waited, and especially a ruling party of India. MEA doesn't count because all the spokespersons, some of them MPs, are shouting about a nation which we border being an enemy. and with which we do the largest trade, more than the US,
I
by
mean,
the way.
China
yeah.
China is an adversarial
Yeah,
nation.
we get it, we get
The Congress disowned those comments.
No,
I agree that there's a
you
contradiction
can
with the
have
trading
that.
relationship.
You
Yeah.
can have that, but it was over a very flimsy thing. It was over a very flimsy thing. You had a declaration of hostility, that you are an enemy, China is an enemy, then stop trade. Don't allow deep seek into India. Why have you allowed that powerful AI engine into India? So it's all mixed up. But forget that story. Get back to this. This story has more questions than answers.
Yeah.
And the president of the US, who does frequently address the press, he does it every now and then. It's not a unique event for him to answer press questions. Should be asked very
Has to.
clearly. How did
Yeah.
who influenced whom through what mechanism?
Yeah, Professor Kartha, I think you brought up, what you said seems to be an innocuous MOU with the Election Commission, but then you said, but the entity in which with which this MOU has been actioned also receives Open Society George Soros funding. Then we are wading into all kinds of a minefield. I mean, either India says any funding into any entity from George Soros is banned. Any funding from USAID is hereby banned. I actually think we need more answers from within our country than we even need from Trump. I mean, USAID is still operating here to the best of my knowledge. It hasn't yet been sent packing. We're waiting for the Americans to take a decision on that. We should be sending income tax should send a notice to USAID. Please show us your accounts.
I think that's one thing I just wanted to pick up on what Rajat said, which I think is true. If according to this IFES, this institute, this thing, this what is it called? Foundation for Electoral Systems, was supposed to be training our officials for for election duties. I mean, who needs that? Why did you do it in the first place? That is my point. The fact that there was this innocuous sounding thing is there doing something. Why did a government entity need to do this kind of an MOU at all? Forget about the money. That is, like you said, let's ask questions of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. Second thing is that if I think, as we said, there is this Mike Benz, I think, has said that USAID was interfering in Bangladesh. There was money being sent. So that the US money does a lot of stuff in terms of regime change is unquestionable. It does. And it does it all over the place. Number 3 is, like you said, this was President Trump just, sort of throwing it off the thing as what he said about Zelensky, that there is some money being siphoned off, is not new. So there is an element of truth in what he says. So how much this is up to us to discover. One. In that, let's not make a witch hunt of this. But I would ask this from the election commissioner, why did you feel it necessary to sign this MOU? That is something I need to know. You are saying you're the biggest democracy in the world. You should be telling others, we'll come there and teach you, which is what he's saying also. But what was that need at all? So this whole,
No. Go ahead. You're saying, then I think what you're saying is it's immediately incumbent on the EC to respond about this MOU.
Yes.
The reports of this MOU.
He has said that he has signed the thing with them. They took no money. That's the point. I mean, but I don't know how you.
But if they took no money, then what is this 21 million for?
No, you cannot have a training course without taking money, no? Obviously, somebody is going to charge you something. The whole thing says, we will train, we will strengthen, we will help XYZ. So obviously some money was given, which was probably entirely within the books. Again, I'm saying it is where else USAID, like that whole OCCRP thing, which exposed the Adani scheme. That is also a front for USAID, not front. Sorry, they are also funded by USAID. So there are these tentacles of various people, keeping in mind the one single job of USAID is to further US foreign policy objectives. And the 2024 report says their job is to push us as a regional power. That's what they say in black and white. What else they do, we don't know.
Yeah, these are good questions, and I think we've never paid attention to them. I think that's the point. Saba, quickly, then Rajat and Ambassador Sinha last
I
comment.
just want to say one thing, because what everyone is saying got me thinking of no country has done regime change the way US has done. Direct military interference throughout Latin America, throughout the Middle East, throughout Afghanistan. They go and they sort of, no one else does what they have done. So Donald Trump, the US president, who's threatening the deep state of America, has suddenly talked of attempting regime change in India in the past. So at some level, we need to examine it. I mean, Iran had a revolution because a certain election was subverted by the Shah of Iran, right? Anyone who's done a little bit of world history would know that how much the US interfered in world affairs to protect its interests of oil, gas, whatever they be, strategic. What happened in Cuba? What happened in Latin America? So now that he's trying to blow the whistle, he's sacking bureaucrats, dismantling this, getting rid of even his European friends are sort of they don't know what to do. So at this point, we cannot entirely ignore it, and we definitely need to get more information. That's what I want to know. Yeah.
So Rajat, if this trail leads back to this MOU with the Election Commission, then what happens to this debate?
If it leads to Election Commission for doing some kind of a training, then immediately I would, as a citizen, would want to see a bill to be tabled that no constitutional body can take foreign money, period.
Yeah.
No Supreme Court can tomorrow go out and take money. No High Court should. No election commissions should. None of these independent constitutional bodies should do that. See, essentially, we have seen in Manipur, in Bangladesh, in several places, democracies are essentially very fragile. And some kind of a disproportionate amount of money can tilt the scales in unseeming ways and in ways which are detrimental to the core interest. And I think the entire episode, if we see, be it George Soros or this current USAID, I think it has created a high degree of public suspicion in any of these institutions. And in turn, what it is going to do is all political parties, all such quasi-government or constitutional bodies would be refraining from taking a single paisa from any or single dollar from any of these organizations in the future. They would be really scared. I mean, now there is enough amount of public deliberations and discussions around this that no future governments are going to take any kind of money exchange lightly. RBI has already tightened its screws around any money that comes into even personal private company accounts into our country. You need to make n number of disclosures. I think those regimes are going to further tighten, and you will find it extremely hard that individuals or companies or contractors getting external funding into India, and it should be the norm.
I do agree. Ambassador Sinha, there is a balance to be found here, a balance that doesn't encourage paranoia and witch hunting. But I do kind of agree with everybody that why should the Election Commission need foreign funding? We call ourselves proudly a country that can teach the world on how to conduct democracies. Our election commissioners travel in the region to be observers for other countries. It's all very odd. But if we leave it unanswered, nature abhors a vacuum. All kinds of conspiracy theories are going to fill that vacuum. We need facts. Somebody has to provide the facts.
I agree with you there that people have to provide facts. But I don't think we should necessarily get paranoid about the fact that the Election Commission organized certain activities. The Election Commission may have organized certain activities in cooperation with USAID in other countries to promote India's experience or American experience or joint experiences. And that, I think, is a good thing. So I think we need to know more about this before we start jumping about interference. Now, we accept completely. Nobody can deny that the US has interfered in elections in other countries. It has interfered, including in India, other countries. Other superpowers, other smaller countries have also tried to interfere in our elections. But I think we should also be a little more confident of our electoral process. That while countries may want to interfere, I think our electoral process and our electorate is mature enough to deal with these matters. And $21 million is not going to sway the Indian electorate. So I think we should be a little more restrained in our response, but we should certainly seek more information before we start jumping.
I think that is indeed the bottom line. Our democracy is much more robust than Trump might assume. However, there are so many questions here and just not enough answers. And our job is to keep asking those questions. Thank you so much, Ambassador Sinha, Saba, Naqvi, Rajat, Sethi, Kartha. Thank you so much to our audience, and see you soon. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Voter Story and support independent, robust journalism.